Hello there, you are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the broadcaster and commentator, Ali Miraj, and the political correspondent for Politics Joe, Ava Santina Evans. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Metro leads with the story of 17-year-old British boy Alex Batty, who disappeared in Spain 6 years ago and has now been found in France. Lost Brit boy found after 6 years. That's the front of the Mirror. The Mail asks the big question, where's Alex been for the last 6 years? The Telegraph reports that a Hamas plot to kill Jews in Europe has been foiled by police after arrests in Denmark and the Netherlands. An investigation carried out by The Times alleges that a pro-vaping campaign is being funded by the major tobacco companies. After holding its base interest rate at 5.25% yet again, the eye carries a warning from the Bank of England that rates may have to rise again next year. The Guardian has an eyewitness report from inside a besieged town in eastern Ukraine with the headline, "We will stand until the end," on the front line in Ukraine. And the Daily Star warns that vegging out in front of the TV could lower your IQ, not because of the programmes, but because of the chemicals in sofas. They've managed not to say the word scientific boffins this time round. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Ali Miraj and Ava Santina Evans. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with this remarkable story on the front pages of many of the newspapers. And this is Alex Batty, who's been missing for 6 years and found in France today, Ali.
Extraordinary story. As you say, he's been lost for 6 years. It looks like his mother and his grandfather initially took him to a commune in Morocco, seemed to have ended up in Spain, and then from there he somehow got to France. He was picked up by a student delivering medical supplies. Very, very strange story, difficult to piece together exactly what's happened. I'm sure that we're now going to see the details come out. But absolutely extraordinary. Apparently he was walking for 4 days. He was found with a skateboard under his arm in the rain. And luckily this individual who stopped to speak to him, who was driving this van, actually took him on board and actually found out what happened. And now he's obviously speaking to social services and has been brought in. And this Interpol search that has been going on for years has now ended. We're going to find out the details of this. I'm sure his grandmother is over the moon, who is his legal guardian, that he'll be coming home, hopefully for Christmas. But what an extraordinary story.
Yeah, and lots more to come out, we'd imagine, much more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the most extraordinary points about this was that Greater Manchester Police, who were following the case back in 2017, they had significant evidence to show that he had actually been, well, the mother and the grandfather had tried to take Alex over to Morocco and failed from Malaga. And somehow he ended up in Spain until 2021, and then he was moved to France. What will be interesting to find out, how did he get across the Spanish and French border and no one picked him up? I mean, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it, if a missing child who's been hunted by Interpol?
Yeah, no, as we say, Ali, there's much more to come out on this story and the detail to be revealed. But he is safe this evening and going to be making his way back to the UK.
Well, it'll be very, very good for his grandmother that he can be home. Clearly, if someone has gone missing for 6 years in this manner, it is highly unusual, untypical. And clearly we want to hear his story because it's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, he's walking for 4 days on his own. Heaven knows how he got to the point where in Toulouse he got picked up at this point. And we'll also be finding out in time, I guess, what has happened to him over the past 6 years, where he's been living. It's unclear exactly where he's been for the last 6 years. Clearly, this is an issue for social services. Everyone would be wondering where he was and what has happened to him. So it's good that he's actually safe.
Yes, and that is the question that the Daily Mail is asking. Where has he been for the last 6 years? That's their headline.
Yes, and it's he says that Fabian, who found him, who picked him up, claims that Alex had told him he'd been in a spiritual community, which is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, and now as he's with social services, I think there'll be quite a lot of work that needs to be done with him. I don't think this will be the last. You know, he won't be going home to be living a happily ever after. I'm sure this will be quite a long process.
Yeah, no, it is an incredibly long period of time, 6 years. Let us move on to the I and looking at interest rates. What do we think of this story as to whether it actually represents what Andrew Bailey has said today?
Well, I think Andrew Bailey is indicating that he's keeping his powder fairly dry. I saw Andrew Bailey the other week at a function in the city. He's not giving anything away, as you would expect for the Governor of the Bank of England. He's got an extraordinary, difficult job to do. The Monetary Policy Committee decides on interest rates. They decided to keep them on hold at 5.2% for now. It was a 6-3 vote, 6 in favour, 3 in favour of actually hiking rates. And the interesting thing for Andrew Bailey and the Monetary Policy Committee is that the Fed, under Jay Powell, they've kept their rates at about 5.25% as well. But Jay Powell has indicated that there's going to be some monetary loosening coming next year, which is going to be good news for the US. The reason why Jay Powell and the Fed are worried is because they want to strike that balance between recessionary elements in the economy and also controlling inflation. But they're indicating that there's going to be loosening. This puts pressure on the Bank of England and the ECB, led by Christine Lagarde, to also loosen here. And at the moment, the concern is that inflation is still not completely under control here. It's 4.6% still. People are still suffering out there. And what the Bank of England would want to see, and the ECB for that matter, is control over prices, so inflation coming down, and also the fact that the heat in the employment sector is calming down in terms of wages. We've had a lot of wage increases because people are trying to catch up with inflation, understandably, but that increasingly causes further inflation in the system. So they want to see that calm down before there will be any reduction in interest rates. That's what we expect.
But do you think it's over pessimistic for the Governor of the Bank of England to suggest that further hikes may be needed?
Well, I didn't quite take that from today when he was speaking. But, I mean, I suppose it is one interpretation. I think this is going to be a really big story tomorrow, particularly amongst Tory MPs. I think this is politically a huge story because, obviously, Tory MPs who are desperate for tax cuts, that's one of the things that is very worrying for the Bank of England. You know, if we move into the new year and Rishi Sunak does give those pre-election tax cuts, then that is going to fuel inflation. And so this is basically a cautionary tale here, isn't it? They're trying to keep the lid on what could potentially happen in the next year, you know.
Well, you see, no, I was going to say, Ava, that you've hit the nail on the head there, because this is the problem. So on the one hand, the government is trying to cut taxes to win an election, obviously. On the other hand, the Bank of England is trying to quash inflation. This is where both sides of the vehicle are not working in tandem, right, at the moment. This is the problem that the Bank of England is going to have. It's going to be inflationary tax cuts. It's exactly the point.
Let's move to the Guardian. Just got time to fit this story in, and this is about a description, really, a first-hand account of what it's like on the front line in Ukraine, particularly eastern Ukraine, a town of Avdiivka. Ali.
Look, the situation in Ukraine is absolutely appalling. This war has now been going on for some time, and it looks like there's no sign of it ending anytime soon. Now, Vladimir Putin has been out at a press conference today. The other day, he was asked if he was going to go for another presidential term, and he said yes, he's going to. He wants to be there longer than Stalin. He's got no opposition. Alexei Navalny's languishing in some prison, which you don't even know where he is at the moment. He's got no real opposition whatsoever. So he will be there as long as he really wants to. We thought there might be a bit of a wobble. In the early stages of this war, it was going pretty badly for Russia, but he seems to be regaining ground. And the reason why he's regaining ground, and the reason why Putin wants to play the long game here, is because he knows and he is certain that the West's resolve will waver. He knows that there are US elections coming next year. It's highly likely that Trump might be back in the White House, and then all bets are off. At the moment, the US Congress is going to be voting on a $60 billion package of further aid for Ukraine. The Europeans have given a $50 billion commitment over 3 years. They also have opened accession talks for the EU with Ukraine and Moldova. That will be good for Zelensky, but ultimately, there is no sign of this war ending. And Putin has said until it's denazified, demilitarized, and it's neutralized, it's a neutral state, he is not going to give up.
Yes, but as you say, Ava, we have seen today EU leaders voting to start negotiations for Ukraine to join the bloc.
Yeah, absolutely. But as Ali says right there, you know, Zelensky is completely reliant economically and militarily on the rest of the EU. And, you know, Russia's got longevity in this argument. They have assets and they've also been able to continue trading despite some of the sanctions that were put in by the West. You know, Russia are quite content with carrying on until they're happy with it. But, you know, as you said as well, the one contender for opposition, the one challenger to Putin is this, you know, Boris... Sorry, I'm going to completely butcher his name.
Navalny.
No,
the other one.
Yeah, the other one.
Yeah, there is another one,
Yes.
that's true.
Yes.
After the break, we'll have the correct pronunciation of that. But yeah, his only challenger is a lone ranger, a lone wolf. And look, it looks like it's going to be Putin from here on out, so the Ukraine war will continue.
It's an appalling situation. But look, as Putin will realise exactly what happened in Afghanistan, at some point the West's resolve will wane. He's waiting for that position to occur. Look, there is also... it's not universal, even in the EU, that accession talks should begin. We know that Viktor Orban walked out of the meeting of the EU 27 leaders on this particular point. So we'll see what happens there. But I also think it puts into perspective some of the early claims that Zelensky was making about taking back Crimea in the early stages of this war, which was given up in 2014. That one has to now be realistic. There has to be, at some point, a negotiated settlement. Now, that's very difficult because at the moment, neither side want to do that.
Well, it's something Zelensky's been completely opposed to.
Well, of course he has. And as far as Putin goes, he's willing to, and it's written in the Guardian piece here, throw more and more of his soldiers' lives in the front line. And they've been, one of the Ukrainian officers here is basically saying the Russian soldiers get put forward like pieces of meat by their commanders. 300,000 already dead on the Russian side, and he keeps chucking more and more. So Putin's in this for the long game.
OK. Ali and Ava, for the moment, thank you. We are going to take a break. Coming up, a watershed moment in sporting history as a woman will referee a men's Premier League football match for the very first time. We'll be discussing that next. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Ali Miraj and Ava Santina Evans, taking us through the papers. And we're going to have a look at the Metro, first of all, and this lobbying scandal story following the suspension of Scott Benton and potentially might cause a by-election. Ava.
So Scott Benton he had the whip removed after a Times investigation revealed that he had been dabbling in some lobbying with the gambling industry. And once this was blown open, he turned himself in and he had the whip removed. And we've been waiting on a judgment. The judgment has now been given, which is he will have a 35-day suspension if the Commons vote on it. Now, when that vote will be scheduled, because we're coming up to the Christmas period, is another question. But it's likely that it will just be nodded through, and that will mean another by-election for Rishi Sunak. And just off the top of my head, I think that's the 10th by-election for the Conservatives in the past year, which is quite extraordinary. And I think they've only held on to one or two, maybe.
Well, they held on to it in Uxbridge and
Yes.
South Ruislip because of the ULEZ thing, 495 votes. But they've been absolutely slaughtered, annihilated in really, really safe seats. Now, this is Blackpool South. If there's a recall petition here and the people want him to face an election, this is a majority of 3,600. I mean, come on. The Tories are heading for electoral disaster at the moment. Even John Curtis, the polling guru, says that they are potentially on track for 130 seats at the next general election, which is even lower than the 165 seats that John Major got when he faced electoral wipeout in 1997. It's dire. You've got a Prime Minister here who's trying to do his best, but he's pretty inexperienced. He's facing a party that is complete meltdown, and you have successive scandals. You've got Peter Bone as well in Wellingborough, which is ongoing. There's an investigation going on there about sexual impropriety. This nonsense simply does not stop within the Tory party. I mean, you've now got this corrupt lobbying scandal. You had the one with Owen Paterson when he lost his very safe seat in Shropshire. this has got to stop.
But this is not a safe seat at all, as you say.
Absolutely.
You know, this is red wall. This was a Labour seat before
Absolutely.
Scott Benton won it in 2019, and it's really the sort of seats that the Conservatives would have liked to have held on to. And look, it'll be a fascinating by-election because you're going to see Reform as well. The Reform Party, they'll come out swinging for this. The Lib Dems will make much more of an effort than they did in 2019 now that they know it's possible.
Yeah.
It'll be quite an exciting election.
And the Reform Party can be the spoilers these days because they can take enough votes to actually prevent the Tories winning in marginals. I think this is going to be a foregone conclusion. But in somewhere like an Uxbridge, that's exactly what can make the difference.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And one of their proponents is out of the jungle now, isn't he?
Well, indeed. Indeed.
Let's have a look at, from politics to the Premier League, the First Ladies, the headline, the Mirror Sport, and we're talking about Rebecca Welch.
Yeah, which I think is a momentous moment for the game, that you're going to have the first woman to referee, fully referee a Premier League match. I think she was her fourth referee in a recent match. And I just think it shows how far the women's game has come. And the fact is that in a few years' time, this will not be a story anymore, which will be a great thing. I'm all in favour of people of whatever background, whatever gender, as long as they're competent doing the job. Premiership referees have a difficult job. It's pretty aggressive at times. There's no excuse for bad behaviour on the pitch. And I think it's a very good thing that we have a woman now who will hopefully bring some calmness on the pitch to some of these unruly players at times. And we've also got the first black referee in the Premier League for 15 years, which is also an indication that things are changing in the game. And a lot more needs to be done to bring diversity in the game. It's much loved. Many of us watch Match of the Day and follow the game very, very seriously. And I also think it follows on from the great success of the women's footballers, not only winning the Euros, but also doing well in the World Cup.
Ava, I was just wondering before, when we were talking in the break, whether all of this pressure and this highlighting that she's the first woman in this position, whether it probably is unwanted.
I don't imagine that many football fans would have noticed it if it hadn't been splashed all over the front pages. I mean, how often are you really looking at the referee on the pitch? I mean, you know, how often are you really looking at the gender of the referee on the pitch?
Well, one got punched the other day in Turkey, right? I mean, the whole Turkish league is suspended because the president of one club punched the guy in the face. I mean, this is not acceptable at all.
The argument there would be against the players punching, wouldn't it? Rather than, whether a man or a woman could take the punch better.
True. But I do think it's a seismic moment. I think it's a good thing.
Oh, obviously, definitely a good thing. Ali and Ava, thank you very much for the moment.